Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. I've been struggling with the introduction for this one because it's another one with a big twist at the end of the first episode. I'm kind of torn between that urge not to spoil it, but also knowing that the reveal in question is the whole premise of the show, so obviously I can't talk about one without the other. So I guess I'll just start by setting the scene. Gakkou Gurashi takes place at Megurigaoka High School, almost entirely in the school, in fact. Our main protagonist, Yuki, is a proud member of the School Living Club, a group of 4 girls who love the school so much that they never leave. There's a garden up on the roof where they grow food, they use the locker room showers to stay clean, and they camp out each night in their sleeping bags in the student council room. Which maybe isn't a sentiment I could relate to exactly, but it was a sweet, whimsical idea for an anime. Yuki is a very sweet, whimsical sort of protagonist. She's in her final year, but she seems a lot younger, with no end to her energy and enthusiasm. One of those characters who's just cuteness personified. All the girls are cute in their own ways, but the other 3 did balance her out. The club president is Yuri, often just called Ri. Ri was also very sweet, but in a motherly sort of way. She looked out for everyone, but also kept them in line. She was the kind of person they knew not to cross when she was serious. Kurumi could often match Yuki's energy, but in a more sporty, aggressive sort of way. Kurumi was definitely an early favorite, but I really did come to love all the girls by the end. Lastly, we have Miki, the only underclassman. And at first, I think it's probably natural to assume that her age is the reason she's a little on edge during this whole first episode. That she's nervous, being around her older clubmates. Miki is the quiet, introverted, bookish type, so it would have fit. Alternatively, it could have been read as exasperation from having to chase around Yuki all day, who may have been older, but who was far less responsible. But there are a lot of at-firsts with this show. There are a lot of little things, as Yuki's going about her usual carefree school day, that may not have been cause for too much speculation if it was just the 1 or 2 things. Like Kurumi always carrying around a shovel like a weapon is just a quirky thing. That the girls are allowed to keep a dog in the school with them tests the bounds of believability, but hey, it's anime. Crazier things have happened. It's when more and more strange things start popping up that you might start getting a little suspicious. Like when the dog gets out and the girls end up on a wild chase through the school. Miki doesn't seem to think twice about interrupting Yuki's class. They end up on the roof, but only because there was a strange barricade made up of desks and chairs blocking one of the hallways. And up on that roof, there's a cross planted in the garden, like the kind used to mark a grave. And at the end of the first episode, we finally get to see the truth. Miki gets worried when Yuki goes off on her own, so she chases her back to her classroom, where we previously saw Yuki chatting with friends. Except now we see the scene for what it really is. Yuki standing alone, talking cheerfully to herself in a destroyed classroom where everything's covered in blood. The camera moves out to the schoolyard, where we see what was once the student body, now staggering around mindlessly. These 4 girls are quite possibly the last remaining survivors of a zombie apocalypse, and the trauma of the experience has taken its toll on Yuki's mind. Our main protagonist has only managed to remain so cheerful because she's retreated into her delusions of happier days. And a part of me wishes I'd been able to feel the full effect of this surprise, but I have to admit that I did know about the twist going into it. Most of the summaries I've read are really good about keeping it quiet, making it sound like the series is just a regular, super light-hearted slice of life. Which I'm sure is really cool for some people, to be totally blind their first time through. Personally, I can say that I never would have checked it out if I hadn't already heard about the darker side to this show. Purely cute, wholesome things just aren't that interesting to me. Cute things that have taken a sinister turn, on the other hand. I'll get to my overall thoughts, but let's just say this series was really well suited to my tastes. One thing that impressed me nearly all the way through was the balance Gakkougurashi managed to maintain. Because you'd think that once that bomb was dropped, there's no going back, right? But though everything does have a dark edge to it once you understand what's really going on, the light-hearted, everyday high school things they're doing to keep Yuki stable never really feel out of place. You see all the familiar slice-of-life tropes, but they usually serve another purpose, too. Like when Yuki's lamenting how it's her last summer of high school and they haven't done any fun summer things. The other girls were already planning a trip into the less secure areas of the school for supplies, so they dress it up as a test of courage for Yuki. Cleaning the water filtration tank becomes a pool day, that sort of thing. Gakkougurashi made it work. You could enjoy the fun scenes without taking your eyes off the danger lurking just a floor below. Succeeding with that balance is really the only reason I was able to enjoy Yuki's character, too. I did say I loved all 4 of the girls, but if anyone was going to test me, it would have been Yuki. I have to say I'm not generally that forgiving of the type of character who crumbles under pressure, as harsh as that may sound. I'm not totally unsympathetic. I appreciate that she's experienced something incredibly traumatic, but they were all regular, relatively carefree kids at the onset of the infection. Everyone else shaped up in the face of this threat. Not perfectly, and not immediately, but Yuki's the only one putting them all in danger by burying her head in the sand. She was saved by a few things. One is that her positive attitude serves a purpose. Another great aspect of the characters in this show is that they were just regular kids not that long ago. They've had to grow up a lot to survive, but indulging in Yuki's delusions is helping to keep them sane as well. But the show also makes it pretty clear that it can't last. We see evidence, pretty early in, that on some subconscious level, Yuki does know what's really going on. She recognizes that she's in danger when she stumbles across a zombie in the library. If she was totally gone, I have to imagine she would have thought she was seeing another student. It made me eager to see her finally overcome her fears, but the role she played in the other girls' lives kept me from being too impatient for it. Miki was the slightly more ideal version of that type of character, the one who struggles to be brave. Miki wasn't at the school when it started. The other 3 found her holed up in the mall while on a supply run. But they almost didn't. Before this whole ordeal, Miki hadn't been the type to take action and make the hard decisions. She'd been waiting around to be rescued, and if she hadn't found the courage to leave her safe haven when she heard their voices, she likely would have died in that room. That knowledge has really stuck with her since, and it was great to see her grow from it. But also, still feeling a bit like an outsider to this group allowed Miki to be a bridge between the characters and the audience a lot of the time. She was the one who asked questions. She's occasionally uplifted by it too, but Miki has the hardest time just going along with Yuki's delusions. At one point, she even accuses Ri and Kurumi of being selfish for not wanting to try and snap her out of it. Yuki and Miki both really step up in a big way during the final conflict, but whereas that's Yuki's one big moment, Miki's whole story was about her growing over time. Sometimes she felt more like the main protagonist than Yuki did, and I'm tempted to name her as my favorite. But then there's Kurumi, who moved me just as much. The big difference between Miki and Kurumi is that Kurumi's already left her past self in the past at the time the story starts. But her moments of reflection were particularly striking to me. I said that she came across as the sporty, aggressive one, even when this show was presenting itself as an ordinary slice of life. But the truth is, when she joined the track team prior to the infection, it was always more about getting close to the boy she had a crush on than any kind of passion for the sport itself. That Kurumi also had such small, ordinary worries once upon a time was striking to see, because she's really embraced her role as their protector since then. Her shovel was just the first thing she grabbed when her boyfriend succumbed to the infection and went after her. Her instincts kicked in and she took him down before he could infect her too, and now she carries that shovel with her everywhere, and puts it to good use. Some of the most moving things about Kurumi are what goes unsaid. She regularly patrols the school, checking up on their defenses, and occasionally taking out a lone zombie who may have wandered too close. Ri tries to tell her, on one such occasion, that she doesn't have to feel obligated to do such an awful job, but that sense of responsibility was one of my favorite things about her. For most of the story, Kurumi's the only one who's taken a life. It's not just about keeping them physically safe, chipping away at the threat one zombie at a time. She also wants to protect her friends from that particular burden, and it's impossible for me not to respect that. There is a fifth major character, who I loved just as much, but who I'm not going to go into here for the sake of avoiding spoilers, which is just a little unfortunate because it makes it a little harder to express what I loved about Ri's character. She was another one whose really admirable traits are things that aren't called out. Her maternal nature, how she watches out for everyone, is more something that you just get a feel for over time. What was particularly moving to see was that, for Ri also, it was a role she had to grow into, and she was really only pushed into that growth in the face of the hole left behind from that fifth character. But seeing how much energy she put into making sure everyone was taken care of was really respectable too. So, the characters were all great. The story was really interesting and concludes in a way that brings each of those characters to their full potential. I can't say I'm terribly well-versed in zombie lore, so I'd say there was a comfortable amount of analysis here. The girls weren't experts on the subject either, but they spent a lot of time observing. Something that comes up repeatedly is that they seem to be governed by a lot of muscle memory from when they were alive, which is why they weren't that active at night, or why they swarmed the building to try and get inside when it rained. It sounded believable, and it made certain things about the conclusion just plausible enough that I don't feel the need to critique it. But I do have to bring up the censorship. I'm sure it was just to keep the rating down, but the real violence tends to happen just off-screen, or the view of the zombies will be so distorted you can barely see what's happening. It did get me thinking a bit. I kept coming back to Another, a show that had a genuinely interesting story, but which seemed to prioritize the shock value of the gory scenes over telling that story. In that light, I'm glad Gakkougurashi didn't have that problem. I'm just generally not a fan of anything being censored. Like, you brought me into this scene of Kurumi bashing in zombie heads. Don't try to tell me at the last minute that it's too much to handle. That is almost literally it, though. There was one episode, when the final mystery was starting to come together, where I did get a little impatient with the lighthearted distraction antics, but it's not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things. I feel like there should be at least one aspect I found truly disappointing, but this show really was nigh perfect for me. It hit all the points that really matter to me. You've got your dramatic character growth, your mushy friendship story, a little lighthearted fun, and a healthy dose of psychological horror. I really can't recommend this one enough. Thank you for watching.